Oh, look at him, fellas. You crying, boy? Maybe we'll go back down to McDonald's and get you a Whamburger and some French fries. You little sissy boy!
Ladies and gentlemen, something demonstrably evil happened on Jimmy Kimmel's show. I know that is an evergreen headline and an evergreen comment that we could make pretty much every week of the year. But given the fact that this is coming at a time when the audiences that Jimmy Kimmel regularly radicalizes and lies to, given the ABC News platform, which, by the way, is taxpayer funded, with luxurious and lavish gifts from the federal government to ABC, the broadcast network, that have major legal stipulations to them, which are to tell the truth. Please put up the tweets, Klein. ABC News must tell the truth. They must operate in the public interest. This is in their broadcast charter given to them by the federal government. I'm going to play you a clip of Jimmy Kimmel victim blaming Charlie Kirk for his own assassination. This is precisely what happened. It cannot be categorized any other way. This is Jimmy Kimmel blaming Charlie, lying about the nature of his assassin, who is a steeped, far-left political extremist, transgender ideology advocate, live-in transgender boyfriend. That is who killed Charlie. He hated Charlie Kirk. Here's Jimmy Kimmel saying it's actually the right that killed Charlie Kirk. And what that is saying that Charlie Kirk deserved it and that Charlie Kirk actually created the conditions. He's to blame for his own assassination. Listen to this.
Some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism.
So this is what Jimmy Kimmel had to say. Jimmy Kimmel saying that that the killer was obviously one of them. This is a clearly and wholly demonstrable, malicious lie. Now, let me explain. The prosecutor yesterday, who's prosecuting this case in Utah, went on camera before the world and set to bed forever the lie that Tyler Robinson was of the right. Now, here at the prosecutor, ladies and gentlemen, explaining the motive. Please load. But also, I want to establish something very quickly. You had the post up, the tweet up, please, about the legal ramifications. And do we have that clip loaded? Great. Yeah. This is a clear-cut violation of the FCC's policy against news distortion and is punishable by the revocation of the offending broadcast license under 47 U.S. Code 312, or at least a hearing of punitive action under 309 section. As organizations granted broadcasting licenses will serve in the public interest, convenience, and necessity, as deliberate news distortion is seen here, contrary to the public interest. What you'll find in this clip is that as Jimmy Kimmel goes on to make fun of Charlie Kirk's political assassination, he's making fun of it. He's using it as an opportunity to attack President Trump. He's standing on the grave of Charlie Kirk, lying about his assassin, saying Charlie deserved it, and then using Charlie's assassination, the murder of a father, the orphaning of his children, the widowing of his wife, the dispatching by left-wing terrorism what would have been possibly one of the greatest presidents in American history. That was the path that Charlie was on. We all knew it. Jimmy Kimmel is taking it as an opportunity to lie to his audience and victim blame. It is the sickest behavior I've seen yet, platformed to the greatest extent. Trust me, we are going to go after a number of people who are doing this. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to just play for the record before we welcome on the commissioner of the FCC, Brendan Carr, to comment on this. It's just that all the facts are straight, and then we'll get to the commissioner. Thankfully, he's able to join our program today to elucidate for us what the FCC can do now when it comes to ABC News. Let us get the facts straight. Here is what the prosecutor says was the motive of Charlie's political assassination. Go.
Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. She stated that Robinson began to date his roommate, a biological male who was transitioning genders. This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. In one conversation before the shooting, Robinson mentioned that Charlie Kirk would be holding an event at UVU, which Robinson said was a stupid venue for the event. Robinson accused Kirk of spreading hate. When asked why he did it, Robinson explained there is too much evil and the guy, referring to Charlie Kirk, spreads too much hate.
Really? Does that sound like one of them, Jimmy Kimmel? Does this sound like one of them? Does it sound like one of Charlie's followers? The guy living with his transgender boyfriend whose entire family says hates Christians, hates conservatives, hates Charlie Kirk, hates President Trump. This was a political assassination, a targeting, in their own words, and according to all of the prosecutors. So ABC News is maliciously lying about the single worst act of political violence in American history. Arguably. Certainly in modern history, left-wing extremist violence. And these are the kind of lies, I want to just state this before we bring on the commissioner. Correction, chairman, my apologies. Brendan Carr is the FCC chairman. These are the kind of lies, omissions, victim blaming, slandering, malice, libels that paint targets on the back of President Trump, Charlie Kirk, of me, of my family. That not a modicum or a scintilla of sympathy can be shed for those who have just lost their father, the children who just lost their father, a wife who just lost her husband, a movement that just lost a generational leader. And that ABC News has monetized and has asked the American taxpayer to pay for these libels through their broadcast license is one of the single greatest insults I have seen in my entire time in the media industry. If not the greatest insult. Ladies and gentlemen, here to speak authoritatively on this issue is the chairman of the FCC, Brendan Carr, joining us live now. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being on our program. This is something that obviously has concerned a great many number of people about Jimmy Kimmel's monologue. What does the FCC's stance on this? Certainly is a heightened moment in American history where you do not want to see copycats, you do not want to see further radicalization, but by slandering and maligning and distorting what happened to Charlie Kirk, Jimmy Kimmel seems to be inviting it.
Yeah, well, first of all, Benny, I don't think, you and I haven't had a chance to talk yet since Charlie Kirk's death. And I think I was going to join everything that you have been saying about Charlie, his life, an amazing man. I think what was so revealing in the last few days is, I think what dawned on so many people is that, everyone I think knew that Charlie Kirk had said something kind to them, had lifted them up when they were at, either a low point in their career or at no point in their career. When you saw so many people conveying their stories with Charlie, you saw a sort of a connection across hundreds and thousands of people that you knew he meant something to you, but you didn't know that he had somehow found the capacity to be that sort of meaningful inspiration for so many people. I think that's why there's sort of a dawning on people and a reflection in the last couple of days that's been so meaningful to see. When you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. As you've indicated, there are avenues here for the FCC. So there are some ways in which I need to be a little bit careful, because we could be called ultimately to be a judge on some of these claims that come up. But I don't think this is an isolated incident. I mean, you go back to Representative Swalwell, and he had a tweet out last week where he was saying that, emphasizing that Charlie Kirk's killer was a straight white male from a Republican family that voted for Donald Trump. In some quarters, there's a very concerted effort to try to lie to the American people about the nature, as you indicate, of one of the most significant, newsworthy public interest acts that we've seen in a long time. And what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican motivated person. If that's what happened here with his conduct, that is really, really sick. And I've been very clear from the moment that I have become chairman of the FCC, I want to reinvigorate the public interest. And what people don't understand is that the broadcasters, and you've gotten this right, are entirely different than people that use other forms of communication. They have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
What kind of action would you see? I, at the very least, would like to have an on-air apology from Jimmy Kimmel to the Kirk family, to all of those who he slandered, because he did say that Charlie Kirk, he is effectively saying that our movement did this. Our movement killed Charlie, that Charlie was deserving of this, effectively. And we've seen that rear its head. This happens quite regularly, actually, on MSNBC and on other networks where they're trying to victim blame. And what that does, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, is continues the lie and continues the threat level to say effectively that we have no share in this problem at all on the left. This is a clear-cut case. What would you like to see done at ABC?
Well, look, I think what you said there strikes me as a very reasonable, minimal step that can be taken. I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at. And again, we may ultimately be called to be a judge on that. But yes, this also strikes me as sort of conduct that to some extent shows some sort of desperate irrelevance. I mean, we're sort of exiting an era where the three main legacy broadcast networks could control and dictate the narrative to the American people. And one of the things that President Trump did when he ran for office, he ran directly at that legacy media establishment. And he smashed the facade that they get to control what we say, what we think, the narrative around events. And we're seeing a lot of consequences that are flowing from President Trump doing that. I mean, look, NPR has been defunded. PBS has been defunded. Colbert is retiring. Joy Reid is out at MSNBC. Terry Moran has gone from ABC and now admitting that they are biased. CBS has now made some commitments to us that they're going to return to more fact-based journalism. And so I think you see some lashing out from people like Kimmel, who are frankly talentless and are looking for ways to get attention. But their grip on the narrative is slipping. That doesn't mean that it's still not important to hold them to the public interest standard. That's what we're going to have to do.
So we did elucidate and enumerate a number of statutes that could be used against ABC. If you would, Mr. Chairman, would you just explain for us what broadcasting in the public interest means? I don't think most people understand actually the depth of how important it is that ABC, NBC, CBS have these gratuitous broadcast privileges granted to them by the American taxpayer.
Yeah, the right way to sort of explain this to people so they understand it is in the media landscape as relevant here, there's two main buckets of actors. One, you've got what we call national programmers. So that's what Comcast is, Comcast NBC. That's what Disney is, Disney ABC. They're the ones that effectively create and produce these shows. They then provide those shows to individually licensed TV stations. And those TV stations are in the main owned by independent companies, independent from Comcast and Disney. But Disney and Comcast both own some televisions themselves. So start from the idea that you have national programmers that create the show, including the Kimmel show, and then they're given to and distributed over licensed TV stations. It's the licensed TV stations that have the public interest standard, including those TV stations that Comcast and Disney own. So FCC regulatory action focuses on those individual stations. And one thing that we're trying to do is to empower those local stations to serve their own communities. And the public interest means you can't be running a narrow partisan circus and still meeting your public interest obligations. It means you can't be engaging in a pattern of news distortion. We have a rule on the book that interprets a public interest standard that says news distortion is something that is prohibited. Likewise, we have a rule that addresses broadcast hoaxes. And so, again, over the years, the FCC has stepped back from enforcing it. And I don't think it's been to the benefit of anybody. Just look at the credibility of these legacy media. It's absolutely through the floor. They used to be able to say at least they were more trustworthy than Congress, but now they're even less trustworthy than Congress. And so I think as a business matter for them, something has to change. And at the FCC, we need to reinvigorate this. So again, there's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters. And frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt. We are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we licensed broadcaster are running the possibility of fines or license revocations from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion. So I think, again, Disney needs to see some change here, but the individual licensed stations that are taking their content, it's time for them to step up and say, this, garbage, to the extent that that's what comes down the pipe in the future, isn't something that we think serves the needs of our local communities. But this sort of status quo is obviously not acceptable where we are.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for explaining it that way, because I don't think that a lot of people quite understand the regulatory nightmare that a company like Disney is under in a situation like this. Because you have the company Disney that obviously appeals and markets to children in a constant basis, and they are having one of their companies that they own that is now maligning a hero of so many of those kids. Charlie Kirk was a Gen Z hero. So many of those kids that were raised on Disney and Disney products looked up to Charlie, and to lie about his death and to not be forthright about the forces that killed him culturally and that threaten other children, obviously, on a day-to-day basis, as we are constantly seeing, is a massive liability.
Well,
Disney should get very serious about threats to children.
Yeah, Disney's got a lot of trouble. Look, we've launched, I don't know that we've talked about this publicly yet, but we have launched and are continuing to run a investigation into Disney for their DEI practices for potentially violating the own FCC's equal employment opportunity rules. We've issued Disney a letter of inquiry on that. We've received some documents from them. Again, we haven't talked, I don't think, publicly about that before, but that is a very active investigation that's underway into Disney on that conduct. And again, to your point, step back for a second. If the public interest means anything, if we're going to enforce this thing, just look at the number of hoaxes that have been run on the American people with the aid of a lot of these broadcasters. You've got this, the whips at the border story. You've got Covington Catholic. You've got Juicy Smollett. You've got Hunter Biden's laptop. You've got, Joe Biden is sharp as attack. You've got, fake stories about hospitals being overrun by ivermectin overdoses and therefore people dying of gunshots, mostly peaceful protests. The list goes on and on and on. And again, I think whether it's the FCC through our public interest enforcement actions, whether it's as a business matter, these people need to sort of change course, or frankly, the fact that they're increasingly irrelevant because President Trump has run right at them. Most politicians that just said, okay, I'll accept the narrative that, mainstream media is pushing, and President Trump hasn't done that. And frankly, I think, not that there's a great part of the deplatforming of conservatives, but if there is any silver lining to that, I mean, look at what you've built. Look at what Charlie built. Republicans, conservatives were forced to build alternate channels of reaching out directly to the American consumer, and you are winning the battle of ideas by doing that. And the legacy media is struggling, and they're lashing out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for saying that. Obviously, that is what made Charlie so profoundly powerful, is his capacity to reach directly to the millions of grassroots supporters, and then also to reach physically those supporters at large-scale events, many of which we were at together. And those are the kind of things that made him, he was able to do an end round the gatekeepers that typically would keep someone like Charlie from ever having an audience. It actually is a remarkable moment. It's what made him, frankly, so dangerous to so many that wanted to see his life cut short. To honor his memory, we thank you for ensuring that the FCC is going to be enforcing these rules. A final question to you. Do you believe that what Jimmy Kimmel said rises to the level of news distortion?
Look, again, the FCC could be called upon to be an ultimate judge in that, but at this point, I think it's clear, it appears to be clear, that you could make a strong argument that this is sort of an intentional effort to mislead the American people about a very core fundamental fact, a very important matter. At the end of the day, if we do get called upon to cast a vote on this, Disney will have a chance to put in their arguments and explain it. But this is a very, very serious issue right now for Disney.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Please follow Chairman Brendan Carr here on X, the Federal Communications Commission Chairman. This is Brendan Carr, FCC. Also, we have his official chairman's account as well. I don't know if we have that handy, but ladies and gentlemen, you can find him here on X, 170,000 followers here. And ladies and gentlemen, also his official account as well. Godspeed, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks so much, Benny.
Thank you.